Cool. Great. So we're going to start this session on navigating life in the NICU with Jessica Wade. Jessica and I connected on Instagram, so points to that, even if people are currently like moving off of the platform, and have been, I think, really enamored with each other. I think that's fair to say. We've just like become really fast friends. And you guys will hear this, but Jessica had a baby who was in the NICU for a long time and just had a really unbelievable story, and turned it into a nonprofit, which is Mighty Little Giants. And it just became a postpartum doula and is gaining more breastfeeding education and is like one of these people that is just catapulting herself into helping everybody else in the world. And I'm so excited to hear your story again and learn from you. And thank you for being here. So you introduce yourselves, tell us, and then I'll just help facilitate a discussion. But everybody just interject as you want to, really. Okay.
Well, first of all, oh my goodness, Ashley, you know you're my sister. So thank you so much for having me. And you guys, total disclaimer, I am distance learning two little boys. So if they run in here, that's all that is, okay? But anyway, my name is Jessica Wade, and I'm the founder of Mighty Little Giants. And so I just want to share my birth story and give back in any way I can. So feel free, ask me anything. I promise you, nothing's off limits. And I'll do what I can to support and let you know whatever I know. So my birth story, super crazy. It starts off from when me and my husband find out we're pregnant. So we find out we're pregnant, and I'll try to keep this as short as possible, but we find out we're pregnant, and, you know, we go to our first doctor's appointment, and the doctor's like, you know what, you're pregnant, but you're pregnant with empty sacs. So meaning that my hormones were high, there was no heartbeat. So she figured that they needed to do an emergency D&C. And so for me, at that point, that was like foreign language. So I said, what is that? You know, it sounds invasive. And thank goodness I listened to my husband, because in that moment, I was so full of emotion. I didn't want to get connected to something that was not there, you know? So he asked if we could wait a couple weeks for the D&C. We waited. You guys, we went to the appointment. Not only did they find one heartbeat, they found two. And so in that moment, I was just like, oh my gosh, like imagine if I was a 16-year-old girl who took the bus here, who was tired and whatever, and just kind of listened to what the doctor said. So in that moment, we found out that one of the baby's heartbeats was very slow. So one of the babies was going to, quote unquote, possibly vanish, or we would miscarry. So you guys, I'm about 7 weeks at this point. So between 7 weeks and 21 weeks, I knew something was wrong. I knew something was wrong with my body. The pain that I was feeling, I knew it wasn't normal. I went to urgent care 7 times in between 6 and 21 weeks pregnant. And every time I went, they're like, you're fine, put your feet up. At this point, we did, the baby's heartbeat did vanish. It stopped. So, but they're like, keep your feet up, you're fine, you're doing okay. At 21 weeks, my water broke. So within that time, I learned how important it is to trust your own body. You know, no matter what anybody says, trust your body. And my water broke at 21 weeks. So we go to the hospital, and the doctor tells us, okay, you're young, you can go home and try again. Or you can stay here and we can see how long we'll keep you on bed rest. So they thought I would be there for like a couple days, but we ended up being on bed rest for 58 days on my back in the hospital. And, you know, we went through a lot. I told Ashley, like, we went through a lot outside of the hospital. Like, my husband got laid off from his job. We lost our home, cars, everything. Like, that could happen outside of the hospital did happen. And, you know, in that moment, it's so important to, like, when you're working with moms on bed rest, to know that life outside of the hospital is affecting them more than you know. The stress, you're already in a traumatic situation trying to save your baby while going through so much outside of the hospital. So Marlon was born at 27 weeks and 6 days. He was doing okay in the NICU, you guys. We were progressing. We went from an incubator to an open crib. You know, that's like huge. And, you know, my husband started talking to the nurses and said, you know, every time that Marlon, that you guys feed him, he had a feeding tube. He wasn't intubated just yet. He was on oxygen. But they said, every time you feed him, he desats, like we're going backwards. They're like, no, you're fine, you're fine. And turns out he wasn't okay. He was getting fed so much, you guys, that he aspirated, and the milk completely collapsed his lungs. He had a respiratory failure. The milk caused him to get a blood infection and pneumonia. So on Easter Sunday, We call, we're on our way to bring his Easter basket, and they said, something's wrong with your baby, hold on. So in that point, we're like, oh no, we're in the car. We're pretty much there by the time they pick the phone back up. And they had to transfer him to Children's Hospital due to respiratory failure. And, at Children's, he was a very sick little man. He coded 3 times. They wanted to do ECMO, which is like dialysis for babies due to his blood infection, but I didn't feel comfortable with that. So we did blood transfusions. Oh my gosh, he was on 12 drips at one point, his wrists, his ankles, his forehead. And, his rounds started off with what seemed like 100 doctors, and over time got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And every day I said, you know what, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. And I said that. The doctors thought I was crazy. They're like, your son almost just died yesterday. And I'm like, yes, but you know what? He's here. So it's going to be a good day. And I kept that spirit. I kept that attitude. And Marlon ended up being in the NICU for 143 days, but he graduated, and he's such a big boy now. He's 6 years old. He's one of the ones distance learning. And after we got home, we got pregnant with another son who's 4. And so that sums up my story. A lot happened in between, but I didn't want to take too much time on that, so I could provide you with the support and what I've learned during that time. And so because of everything that we went through, I believe that everything happens for a reason, and you can't go through something like that and then just go back to normal life, And so I wanted to give back and do give the support that I needed. And here came Mighty Little Giants. We started off as a NICU support group, which I was just trying to eat with the families and talk and provide support as much as I could, but it turned into something so amazing. Now we have our NICU support group, we have our Life After the NICU, and then we have our Mighty Little Angels group for the families whose babies don't make it out of the NICU. With our Life After the NICU, I always tell people the day our son was discharged was the best day of my life and the scariest day, because you go from an environment that's completely controlled to something where you have to create your new normal while possibly going through postpartum depression with no support. And so that's where we are with Mighty Little Giants. And, the experience has taught me so much. It's taught me so much. And for those on the line who work with families in the NICU, I always tell them, remember that not only these mommies and these daddies, they are grieving. In addition to having a baby in the NICU, they are grieving their birth story. The moms are grieving leaving the hospital without their baby. They're grieving not being able to have the baby latch on first time. They're grieving not being able to have their baby shower. So there's a lot of emotions in addition to watching your baby fight for their life in the NICU. And so that's where we step in and try to give a little peace in the midst of their storm. So that's where we are, Ashley.
I feel like everybody could take a minute. And then I think you actually broke it up nicely. And what I would love to know is, we can talk through it in stages. When you think back, what are the things that were most helpful in getting through your time when you were a parent with a baby in the NICU? And then we can talk about that transition home. So let's start maybe just with, how did you take care of yourself and your mental health? You are far and away the single most positive person I have ever met in the world. So I think you have a skill set that many of us don't have. But what are the things that just made you feel how much do you grieve the loss? How much do you try and stay positive? What does that balance look like?
Okay, so to be honest, you guys, I lived in the NICU. And closer to the end, you have to mother yourself during this time, because like you said, I am a very positive person. So I was able to really mask how I felt from my family. I was able to mask how I felt from my husband. I was always just like, yeah, I'm okay. But it was a dark season for me internally. But some things that I ended up doing closer to the end, by Children's Hospital, there's a nail spa. So I went and got a pedicure, and I felt horrible being away from the NICU those 45 minutes, but just taking a time it's okay to step away. Even walking around the hospital, sitting down, doing some sort of meditation. I clinged on to Zumba. It's my favorite thing now. Try to find something that you can do that does not connect you to anybody else but yourself. That is just So in the midst of it, I just need to be Jessica for a couple of minutes. Due to my son, he was in a hospital about 90 miles away from our house. And at this point, we only had one car. So when I did go home, I took the train. And that was my moment of peace and quiet because I had no other choice but to listen to music and just kind of sit there and just evaluate it all. And so, yes, so just taking a minute to, it's important. It's extremely important to take a minute for yourself.
And then what would you say about navigating with the NICU nurses and the medical team?
Oh my goodness, you guys, this is something so important. I always tell my moms, even though I'm not a medical profession, I'm a mommy and you have to follow your instinct. Advocate, advocate, advocate. I had a situation in the hospital where my son, one of the overnight nurses turned his oscillator up to a point that took us 2 months almost to get down. And I broke down, didn't know what to do. I knew it was wrong. It wasn't approved. And the hardest thing for me to do was to reach out to the charge nurse to talk to the director. But because of that nurse, unfortunately, she was let go, but I was her third strike. So it's important to advocate because you don't know who you're saving. And as far as the NICU staff, in the rounds, it could be scary. And, the terminology is like foreign language. So when you're in the rounds, I would also say, ask questions. Like if they say something that doesn't make sense to you, it might be crazy to them, but pull somebody aside, ask questions. You could also request a family team meeting. And what that looks like is like one of the doctors, a charge nurse, maybe one of the respiratory therapists kind of get together and talk about what their job is within your baby so that not everybody's a stranger because shifts change every 12 hours pretty much. And people will, it's good to know who people are prior to getting there. But I always say advocate and speak up for yourself. And if you speak up, if your native language is not English, request a translator just to be there to really break things down to make sure you truly understand what's going on with your baby, because that's important.
Were there moments that felt like really, like when you all were working together as a team? Like, what did that look like when you and your husband felt like really involved in the process and there was good communication and collaboration?
So at first, I would kind of like during the rounds, I would say is the moments where we were able to really collaborate with everyone. At first, I was nervous because I just kind of wanted to follow what they said. But as I would be there and understand the terminology, them including us, like they would ask questions like, "Hey, Jess, we're going to try this today. How does that sound?" Because they know I'm there every day. I know what happened the night before. And, they would make me, even if they weren't going to do what I said, they made me feel included. And I felt like I had some say so in that moment with my baby.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, hold
on. For folks who are watching too, if you all want to drop questions or comments into the chat box, I can read them out. Especially if you are a NICU parent currently or previously, if you wanted to share anything in response to that too, it could be nice to add your perspective. Okay, so then walk me through, right? A lot of the people that we teach have really short NICU stays, like baby's born full term and they're in the NICU for 3 days, right? Or 24 hours. And so I imagine with Mighty Little Giants, you're supporting some families that don't have such an extensive period of time, right? It's like across the gamut. So I can imagine, but I'm just curious to hear from you, like, what are some of the big differences between a family that's got a short stay in the NICU versus a family that's looking at a longer stay, and what should they each be considering?
So to be honest, even if your baby's in the NICU for 1 day, I always tell my families that if it's unexpected, it feels like a lifetime. Like for me personally, I knew my son was going to be in the NICU because I was on bed rest in the hospital. So throughout that time, I kind of was able to prepare myself. for what it would look like. But for the moms and dads who have babies who will be there for a while, I feel that they come into the situation a little more discouraged because their baby, they could be 1-pounders where they're going to take a long, they have to get their weight up to be able to go home and learn how to eat and all these different things. So they come in a little more discouraged. But I always tell them, these babies, yes, they are small, but they are mighty. Their spirits are so strong. I mean, like, I get so emotional because I love, like, when I started this program last year, and now all of my babies are like 16 months old. Oh gosh, I wasn't supposed to do this. And I just love them so much because when I meet the families, they come in so defeated, but to watch the babies gain their weight, who knew learning how to suck, swallow, and breathe was like such a hard thing to do? These babies have to go through these different milestones in the NICU to be able to get to the point where they're eating on their own, they're breathing on their own, they pass the car seat test. It just makes my heart so full. So they do come in defeated, but I let them know, yes, their bodies are strong, but their hearts and their spirits are so mighty, and they are fighters. And that's where Mighty Little Giants came up. That's how we came up with the name, because they are our mighty little giants. And we really work with the families as far as just kind of, I share my story with them a lot. I tell them, do not compare their stories to anybody else. Whether even 2 27-weekers can have 2 different outcomes. You know what I mean? One 27-weeker could learn how to suck, swallow, and breathe before the other one. One could be intubated, one might not be. And so it just depends on where they're at. And I always tell them, focus on your story. As long as they're in the NICU, it's a good day. And that's what they lean on. And then they're discharged and we're having our first birthday parties.
So
Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. And then, so in terms of doula support or friends and family, right? So we can look at this from either perspective. If you are a doula, what do you think you should be doing? And then if you are a parent in the NICU, what can you ask for from your community? Like, what would be helpful for outside people to be keeping in mind to support them? Yeah.
So I'm going to start with family, because that was a big one for me. I didn't want to be rude, but I did need my space during that time. Like, for example, you guys, I'll tell a quick story. When I was on bed rest, my mom, me and my mom are best friends, but she sent an email out to all of my aunties and all of my like friends, like, Jess is in the hospital, all this. And the last thing I needed were people asking me questions, because I didn't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen in a couple hours. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Please don't ask me anything. And I was flooded with like hundreds of questions, and that takes you into a deep, dark place because you really just don't know. So I would suggest for family to just be there and be present. Be there, be present. And instead of asking the families that you're supporting, what do you need? Tell them what you're going to give them. Say, on Friday, I'm going to deliver dinner to your family. Or on Tuesday, I'm picking you up and we're going to go have lunch or go get Starbucks or something, instead of asking them what they need. Because to be honest, I didn't know what I needed, but I knew I needed something from someone. So anything that my family offered, I took, but I just didn't, I didn't like the questions. So I was able to kind of push back and say, there's nothing personal. I just don't know. But when I do know, I'll let you know. So that's my advice for family. Now, and as far as doulas, oh my goodness, you guys. So I recently became a certified doula in July. Yes, in the beginning of July. And it has been life-changing for me. Now I realize, like, oh my goodness, I could have had a best friend throughout this whole season of my life that could help me and answer questions. And so as far as like the postpartum doula services, I focus more on the emotional support. And so as far as if you have a baby in the NICU, open up to your doula. Open up to a support person. Don't, like, I shielded myself with my smile, but when you open up to somebody that you can trust, it will change your whole situation. Like, invite the help in, invite the counseling in, because it can help you, because you need it at this time. You're going through a traumatic situation. I'm sorry, I'm reading. Have you? Especially due to COVID. So yes, actually, and today is NICU Siblings Day for NICU Awareness Month. So the question is, I hear a lot of parents who have older siblings about how they are split between the NICU and home. Any advice, especially due to COVID? So yes, I actually have one mom who has 7 children and 2 of her babies were in the NICU, and they were split NICU. One was in They were like 80 miles apart. One was in the level 4 NICU, the other one was in a level 3 NICU. And so one of their hardest things was, yes, giving them that time. And so especially due to COVID, I've been telling my mommies, just involve them as much as they can. For the kids at home, make them feel involved. FaceTime if you can within the hospital. I know sometimes there's privacy restrictions if the babies aren't in the room by themselves, but try to do some type of FaceTiming. If you have young kids, have them make like a photo, do a drawing for them and put it next to the baby's, next to the baby's crib or the incubator and take a picture. Just try to involve them as much as they can. And when the moms are at home with the siblings, try not to mention the NICU. Separate the NICU from home as much as you can so that the children at home feel like they still have that one-on-one time with mommy. And yeah, take pictures. If the mom is pumping at home, maybe have the kids around. I don't know, anything to involve them within the NICU and at home, but to make sure you do separate the time and spend that one-on-one time with the families. I hope I answered your question, you guys.
Yeah, I think that that is really smart to incorporate the siblings when you're in the NICU, but then when you're home to try and keep it out of the conversation for a little bit.
Can I say one more thing too?
Yeah.
Because during the NICU, you guys, me and my husband's relationship, we literally had to re-date kind of because my husband was at home by himself trying to financially take care of the house, from job to job so that I can spend time in the NICU, but he was home by himself. And so even to this day, we'll talk and he's like, at least you had the nurses. I had no one. We're 100 miles away from family. My husband didn't know his dad, so he didn't really have anybody to talk to. So connecting with the birthing person and their partner, just always staying connected and trying to spend some time together without talking about the baby, without social media, without phones, really connecting, because that's something that was that we had to work on. And that's something that we talk about with the Life After the NICU program. We bring our moms in and just say, how are you? How's your marriage? Do you need me to watch the baby so you guys can have a date night? Because it's really important, because if you let that slip, it probably could get to a point of no return. So it's important to do that.
I think that that's true across the board, right? When you're having a baby. But one of the families that I supported when I was first starting out as a doula, I think had their baby between 26 and 29 weeks. I don't remember the exact date, but the baby was in the NICU for long enough that both parents went back to work because of various situations in their life and thinking about their maternity or parental leave in general. And that was something that was really challenging for me to know how to support as a doula. Like, what is the balance between continuing to talk to them about updates with the baby versus supporting them? And I think they would generally have described it as like just living in a completely pretend universe for a period of like 6 weeks where they were working and going home and then trading off NICU shifts at night. I don't know, just bringing that into, and I think that I have not had a baby in the NICU personally. So there's a depth to understanding this that I don't have in terms of like a prolonged experience with grief and powerlessness, as you were saying at the beginning. And then also I love what you brought up just about the partners. And I think that that's true for anybody giving birth. Is we run a partner support group. The next one's actually on Thursday, for anybody who's expecting or who's a new parent. And it's like they don't have time to just talk and process, like, what is it like to be a birth partner? What's it like to be a new parent? There's so much attention on the one that's giving birth, and it's just hard. And then you put the fear of a baby in the NICU into the situation, and it can probably be just debilitating.
it's so hard. And before my son was transferred, I went back to work because I was on bed rest, and then I like extended everything that I could. I went back to work, and when I went back to work, and it was just a crazy situation. I didn't have anywhere to pump. Like I was super stressed out at work, and when I got home, it was really like change, go to the NICU. I never took time. Now looking back, like I never took a minute to sit down with my husband. Like, how are you? How's work? Are you hungry? Like, it was just NICU work, NICU work. And then he was transferred, and I lived in the Ronald McDonald House for 3 months away from my husband. And so creating a new normal was something we really both had to be into it to do it. And, one of the things, there was a question about, are you a postpartum, a birth or postpartum doula, and how did I become best friends? I'll answer that next, but yeah, just making sure you check in with your partner, because one thing my husband always said was like, people always ask about the mom. Even when his mom called him, she was like, how is Jess?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, she's good. All right, that was it. And then she would come to the hospital and I would be there. But so it's important because daddies are so important. Our partners are so important to the birthing person.
Yeah, my husband, when I gave birth to my first daughter, I had internal bleeding actually, and so my husband was like the primary caretaker for my daughter for the first 2 days. And it was the same thing. Like, he has an incredibly thoughtful family, and my family's like pretty thoughtful. And nobody was like, oh my God, Matt, are you okay? Like, you have a 5-hour-old baby by yourself. Ashley's like not available right now. And he just like did it, he like, it's a hormonal shift where you're just like, we just keep going, like do all these things. And then processing that after, which I think is true for NICU parents and really so many other aspects of this, is like, give yourself space to process what just happened.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
And then you got pregnant after.
Oh my gosh, I was like, what happened? Like, what I was terrified, you guys. Because I was in the hospital for so long. I was on bed rest for I was in the hospital for 60 days, but bed rest for 58. Have this baby. And then mind you, I didn't take the time, like we just had a Mighty Little Angels virtual celebration. And one thing I told them is I didn't take the time to grieve the twin that we lost, because like, I just felt like I should be happy that I'm lucky to have one. But in reality, I was planning for two. Like, the baby was doing okay. The heartbeat was still okay until about 18 weeks. But it was still like a traumatic situation. And like, give yourself time to not be okay and to voice it. Like, it's okay to not be okay. Just because you have a baby in the NICU doesn't mean like the next day you're the superhero, super woman where you could just take everything and it not affect you. Take time for yourself. For me, I like to go walk around Target, get my Starbucks, and that's my day. Like, take time for yourself and do something that makes you happy. But I do want to answer the question that asked if I'm a postpartum doula. So I'm a prenatal doula for mommies on bed rest. Everything that I do is because of the need that I saw. So for me, when I was on bed rest, if I had someone standing in the gap as far as my life outside of the hospital, and even just being that support person for me would have been amazing. And so when I say become best friends, I look at it as a sister relationship. I'm here to be your sister. How can I help you? And that's what I mean. And I think that's why my mommies, they really open up to me in such a way that, they're comfortable. And then I'm also a postpartum doula for NICU mommies. And with that, I've learned that it's been really, really good because I have the NICU experience, and I've added the education, and my education background's in early childhood administration. So with the, like after the NICU program, we also work with the milestones with the baby, and not comparing the babies. And because it doesn't stop. The day your baby's discharged from the NICU, that's really like day number one for you. Like our son is getting ready to be 7, and he just had his first wiggle tooth. He hasn't lost a tooth yet. It delays, and he has like chronic lung disease. So right now, COVID-19, I'm terrified, and so it's really, really day one. And so you just create that sister circle of support. And I check on my moms all the time, the moms that I've met in the hospital, and we're still connected. You need to create that, whether it's with family members, or, you know, not all family is blood. So if you want to adopt me into your family, I'm here to support you. You can text me anytime. So yes, Ashley knows. I'm like, call me, girl.
It's true. It's true. I want to have a really big cry. I feel like you'd have some space for that. We're all
Oh,
so pent up.
I always make space for a good cry. I'll cry with you.
I think that what you're saying is so hard to articulate in a sentence though, but it's like there's these overlapping circles. That's like the image I have in my head. There's like navigating the NICU, taking time for yourself, talking to your partner, talking to your community, navigating with the nurses. But then what's so unique for each family individually is like, okay, and then what does that mean for possible developmental delays? Or what does that mean for health conditions? Or what does that mean for like your family in terms of employment and benefits and like what you might need? And so everybody's going to have a different interaction with all of those fears, even though the connecting point was like our baby spent time in the NICU, right? And that could be true for babies that aren't in the NICU too, but it's just like an entry point into seeing all of the things that parents are up against, sort of.
It's a lot. Like I have families whose babies go home with trachs and on oxygen. My son came on a heart monitor and on oxygen. And like, so what does that look like, right? I needed to go back to work. We're a two-income family, but I can't find a daycare, affordable daycare for my son, because now he has special needs and they would have to bring him, he would need one-on-one attention. So that costs more, right? So how does that work? Like, I can't go back to work. I need to go back to work. I have this baby with special needs. Yes, we're getting disability, but it maybe covers 1 week of the daycare, because we were looking at $650 every 2 weeks for a part-time daycare for our son. And so like, what does that look like for moms and navigating, or not just moms, but all birthing people and partners, and navigating through that. And I think that's the piece that, because once the babies are discharged, it's like, they're done. I didn't have therapy, but my son did. You know, there was nobody coming in checking on me weekly. My family couldn't relate. They could be there, but they really couldn't relate because they weren't going through it. So where do you go? And so that's the space I'm doing my best to create with our Life After the NICU program, so that moms do have a space to go and we can refer them out. And I can see the postpartum depression, because I was there, even though they try to mask it, you know? So that's where we're at, guys. I was just trying to be everybody's sister.
And Mighty Little Giants is in the hospitals now. Like, that's what I think is amazing about what you're figuring out. It's not like a standalone, I mean, it is a standalone organization, but you're not saying we have this community center, you can come see us. You're getting to work in the hospitals.
Yes, we right now we get referrals from a lot of hospitals, but we've been running our program up here in the Antelope Valley Hospital. We host crafting conversation sessions, which is I just wanted to give it a fun name, because I bring canvases and picture frames, because I like, you can't put people in a room and just say, okay, let's talk about your feelings. But if you bring art and you play music and you bring food, the NICU up here doesn't have a cafeteria. It's totally separate from the hospital. So what happens when you don't financially have money to just like, okay, let me Grubhub something? Like, you know, there's a lot of layers to the NICU, but we bring food in, we talk, we paint, we cry. I have dads that break down, because one thing that a father told me was, he said, I'm a fixer and I can't fix my wife or my baby. You know, and that really touched home for me, because I was like, wow, you know, and I had to come and ask my husband, did he feel that way? And he was like, yeah, I didn't talk to anybody because I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to fix the situation. It's out of your hands. But sorry, I digress. But we are in the NICU, and then families are also referred to us, and I'll do like this. I'll do like a one-on-one session with the family, or we'll do a group of like a Zoom chat where we all kind of get together and just talk. And then we have our Life After the NICU. And then the Mighty Little Angels, with that program, the nurses will refer the families to us, and then we'll help them out. If we need to help fundraise for their funeral costs, we'll do that. And then we also link them with an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep, and they'll come out and actually do like a family photo shoot for those who want it with the baby, and they'll assist with clothing the baby in their casket. So we do what we can with what we have. So
I'm wondering a few things, but if anybody here has other thoughts or questions, I just want to give you opportunity to drop those into the chat box before we wrap up. Yeah, and then if you just joined and you want to drop an intro into the chat box, you can. I lost my thought, Jess. What was it? I don't remember.
That's okay, Ash. I did have some notes too. Let's see. Oh yeah, one of my biggest things was just really advocating, because some moms, they'll send me messages like, I have an issue with this nurse, what should I do? And I'm always like, girl, you follow that instinct. You talk to the charge nurse, tell somebody, don't, because it's literally life or death sometimes for these babies. So always advocate, even if it sounds crazy to you. It's important.
I think that was what I was wondering was for folks that are on the call, I don't know of anything like Mighty Little Giants in New York, at least. Maybe it exists and I just don't know about it, or maybe it's on the East Coast somewhere. But this idea that somebody in the hospital could refer you to a program that's in the hospital to support you, and it just feels people do this to me all the time and it makes me uncomfortable when I like over dramatize what you're doing, but like I feel like it's a revolutionary approach to
Oh
think
my goodness.
that I know you were going to feel like, whoa, that's too big, but I think it's a revolutionary approach to say we can put like community support groups and like real community effort and like love into these hospital situations as a bridge between the medical institutions and humanity. Like this is what people need, right? So yeah, I just think we need so much more of that. We need so many other things. Like we need employers to recognize what's happening in terms of parental leave, but also parental leave with the NICU. We need parental leave for everybody. But I think there is something really important about this community piece and support groups, really. Like I want to go to a craft and conversation with people just to talk about my birth experience. Like nobody else is thinking about that.
You know, that is so, I like get chills, Ash, because to me, I'm like, I'm just Jess, like, and I'm just talking, right? But then I'm learning that like there's a lot of Facebook groups, there's a lot of even Instagram, like different support groups. But as far as a grassroots organization touching the families from sometimes prenatally through early childhood and really, really, really like really being there, I would say. There's not very many, and I'm learning that now that I'm in that world. And at first I would feel weird when people would ask me like, come and speak, or, you know, come, like I just did. We work very closely with like the March of Dimes and just different organizations. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like your voice matters and your story matters. And that's what I tell my moms, like, look, don't, like, Mighty Little Giants started because I could talk all day, and I started talking and people were like, wanted to listen. So you never know where your story is going to take you. And then like the families, if there's anybody on here that has lost a baby or had a situation where like mine, where you had one, you know, you were pregnant with two and had one, speaking about your story is the first step as far as healing. And I didn't realize that I was scarred from my NICU experience until I started speaking about it on events like this. Like it would kind of bring up those emotions. Or like, it's so funny, right now, I work closely with the hospital. When the phone rings that says like Antelope Valley Hospital, my heart sinks. And I'm like, you know, those triggers when I go in there, even the wash your hand station, the sounds of the beeps, like there's things that I think I know how to support my families on because I lived through it. Like, having warm socks was something I really needed because it's cold in the NICU. Noise cancellation headphones because of the noise. Just different things that might not seem like a big deal to some people, but it really, really helps. And I don't know where that came from.
No, tell me more of those. Okay, so we'll wrap up in a minute, but
Okay.
warm socks, noise canceling headphones, like what else? What was your, like if you were to pack a NICU survival bag?
Oh my gosh, and my kid. Okay, so I would definitely have warm socks because I was cold all the time. Like I said, noise cancellation headphones, maybe like mints or candy. If I could give a survival kit to somebody, I would give them like a Uber Eats or like Grubhub gift cards because there were times where the nurses told me, don't go to lunch. We don't know if Marlon's going to make it, but I still needed to eat. So things like that, and maybe even I have little, for those who are open to it, I have little prayer like books that have different prayers, especially when it comes to medical and like with their baby, with their child, just different prayers that will give you encouragement that you need. Like for me, my son coded, and one time he coded for a little over 15 minutes, and that was the hardest thing to watch. And in that moment, like you want to stand there and watch, but it's hard because they're literally doing CPR on your baby, and you see the heart rate come and go, come and go. I use prayer in those moments because I couldn't watch, but I couldn't leave the room because I need to advocate, and I wanted to be in that space. I didn't want him to feel like I left him, you know, and I'll get emotional, but, and so, praying in those moments and providing an extra support of layer of prayer. I give my mommies who wanted like books like that, and even a journal. Journaling really helped me. I wish I would have done the whole time, but after a while I kind of stopped. A good journal, pen, Starbucks gift card. I love Starbucks in that moment. I couldn't, I'm also a certified lactation education specialist. And the reason I became a lactation education specialist, because after I had Marlon, I went and met with our lactation specialist, and, you know, we met with her 3 times, and she got frustrated, you guys. And she said, you know what, it's too hard for you. You either need to provide donor breast milk, or you need to give this baby, continue giving him formula. I chose donor breast milk, but that stigma stayed with me so much, to the point when I did have a full-term baby, I remember my husband had the flu, so I was in the room by myself after getting a C-section. It's a hot mess. But I remember trying to latch my son on, and I was having such a hard time. And I just, in my head, was like, Jessica, this is too hard for you. You can't do this. You tried it before. You can't do this. And so I told them to bring me a bottle of formula. And so I never, now that I know our bodies are so amazing, we can do all things. And I never wanted any of my moms to feel that. So a part of the NICU support, we also provide support in lactation, how to reduce stress, different methods that you can give, you know, self-expression, different things that you can do to give your baby your liquid gold. So I know sometimes it can be heavy, right? It's just a lot.
I'm
It's
also
a
like
lot.
sitting here trying to imagine you postpartum after a C-section with your second baby, like a very short period of time after being in the NICU with your just that whole experience, you know.
My
Um,
husband had the flu. I said, you can't come in here, but
yeah,
so,
yeah, and you know, wanting breastfeeding specialists who are really only working with premature babies, and guiding families through that time, because it's so different.
I just want to. So Miss Pamela Stanley is on the line. She's one of my mentors up here she's a WIC director. I just wanted to say hi and I love you. That's all. Oh, Miss Pam, she's guided me through, and having the support. One thing I would say for Mighty Little Giants is having the support of the community, because for a lot of people, kind of just came out of nowhere, you know, and it's like now it's kind of everywhere. But that really helps to be able to have those relationships with your community. So like right now I have a doula client that I just sent to WIC, but I know the process because I have that relationship. So to what you were saying earlier, Ash, to be able to bring the community into the hospitals, there's so many connecting points, and it really makes a difference. And whatever you can do to ease that person's birth story, we try to do.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So I remember when I said we might not use the whole hour, and then like, look, where does time
Did
go?
we use it? Yeah,
So
we used it.
almost. I
Uh-huh.
think we'll wrap up though. Does anybody else have a thought or a question? Okay. What I'm gonna do is stop the recording. And well, officially for the recording, Jessica, thank you so much. Nobody else leave. I'm gonna stop the recording.